ऐगिरिनन्दिनि नन्दितमेधिनि विश्वविनोदिनि नन्दनुते गिरिवरविन्ध्यशिरोधिनि वासिनि विष्णुविलासिनि जिष्णुनुते.
Namaskar, welcome back again. And we're going to finish this last and the final episode. It's the most important one because it is the episode that talks about her journey out of Christianity. And it happened at the cost of having to walk away from the mother. And the mother that she clung on to for a long time, even after her father divorced and went away, Maya happened to have stayed with her mother for a long time to just provide security for her own mother and also for her to have the elderly presence in her own life. And to have to walk away from that, to get away from your own mother as the only solution to walk away from Christianity, because I'm pretty sure that it was, if you had to walk away from Christianity, it was as good as cutting away from her. And what did it take for you to do that? We'll talk about that right now. Okay. And before we get there, Maya, for a long time, your father's resources were there to support you even while you're studying, right? Mm-hmm. But once you started, you said that your dorm fees was actually used by your mother. Did your mother, because she got a sizable amount of money as part of the divorce, did she take financial responsibility for either you or your brother? Did she spend any of her money to pay your fee or whatever that is? Because obviously that money was hers. Mm-hmm. And it was meant for her to support the family. That's part of the alimony. Did she ever do that?
Well, when my brother was still living with her, she paid enough for his needs, the bare minimum as possible. For me, she was not financially responsible. As I was in college, and I was being provided for by my dad, and I had a little bit of income from working part-time while I was completing my studies as well. So she was not really responsible. And after my brother left, she was responsible for even less. It was just basically her own self.
And did she have any kind of, did she play a role in the way of your choosing a career? Or, I mean, education-wise, what was her role?
Yeah, she didn't have an active role in my studies while I was in school. She was just happy I got decent grades. I only did enough to make sure she wouldn't come down on me heavily for having bad grades or bad marks. And all through high school, when I was searching for colleges and searching for the right major to pick, it was my dad who took an active role in helping me in college journey, taking me to a counselor to help improve my chances of getting into certain schools, and paying for SAT prep course, and also taking me on a college tour. This is a rite of passage, and many Indian parents do for their children. And other than that, she really didn't have much of a say until my parents started the process of divorcing each other. Then she all of a sudden wanted me to pick a career. I was leaning towards biology / pre-med, like a lot of Indians do. But my mother, she instead told me, why don't you choose nursing? And she told me this outright, that I would be in school for much less and I would be able to support her faster than I would if I had pursued medicine. And medical school takes a very long time. Then there's also the residency and all that. It takes a long time to actually start practicing and earning a salary as a doctor.
So in some sense, she always looked at you as her source of income. I can't say income, but financial resource.
Financial security.
Security, right? What is it that you got in return for all this? Obviously, you stuck on with her even when you didn't have to. You had your own freedom in college. I mean, your dad was providing for your dorm, and your education was taken care of. Everything was taken care of, right?
Mm.
So really, there was nothing that she was providing for you that um, I'm saying more tangible stuff, right?
Right.
That kind of thing. For you to cling on to her, even when you knew that she was on the wrong path or she was being controlled by others, what is it that kept you connected with her?
I think guilt or this sense of duty. I am the oldest child, and my brother's younger than me, and he had left. So who would it fall on to take care of her? She had me groomed from a young age to think like that. Even well before college, where well before she pushed me in the direction of nursing, and well before she started to pressured me to steal money on her behalf from my father.
So you were bound by the sense of duty that you had to take care of her the whole time, and she
Yeah,
knew that you would not waver from that path, and she took advantage of
yeah,
that sentiment.
yes, yes.
And at what point did you? What is that one trigger, if you were to name it, that said, no, I'm done with this? What would be that one trigger? I obviously there'll be many things, but what is that one point where you felt like that?
Where I finally said enough.
Hmm.
Yes. Oh, it took me a while to get there too. When I moved at first to Fargo, North Dakota, to start my first nursing job. Then I was very struggling in that job. It's very high pressure. It wasn't the right fit for me. And just before I hit the 1 year mark at this job, I was fired. And my mother, but my mother made me feel absolutely bad about it. And she didn't comfort me at all after I lost my job. And I remember at that time I was feeling at a low point where I wanted to commit suicide. I I stared at I owned a handgun, and I was staring at it for a long time and almost went through with it at that time. It was a very low point for me to be newly graduated, barely survived a year working on my own as a full-fledged nurse, and it was a blow. It was a humiliation yeah. And she was not there to comfort me at all. But that wasn't the trigger. No. I thankfully got another job as a nurse and continued on for several years. And then in the middle of all that, I decided to instead pursue a graduate degree in health informatics, which I did. And my father said he would pay for much of that as well, which I accepted that generous offer, which I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to ask him for money. I knew I was scared I would have to, steal from him again on her behalf. She would pressure me to do it. And of course, she did. Um, he said he would pay a lot of my tuition and fees so that I wouldn't have to take out as many loans as I would need to, because it is quite expensive no matter where you go. And I had made up my mind that I was going to do that no matter what. I just didn't want to have to ask him again. But I relent. She pressured me to pressure him into paying for much of graduate school, and which he did. And also that was also another low point. I felt like I had no agency, and I felt like I was going to have to steal again. Violate the commandment, thou shalt not steal. And once again, I found myself staring at the handgun, wanting to commit suicide. And I almost went through with that at that time too. But eventually I capitulated, and whatever my dad was giving me to pay for tuition and fees, I was actually sending to her. You see, at the time I had moved to Fargo, a year after I moved, and she moved in with me around the same time, she actually went back to India to take care of my nanny who had fallen sick. At least that was the excuse. But in reality, I think she wanted to move back to India because the dollar to INR rate is, you get a lot more in India. So she wanted to live in a nice house somewhere in the Nainital area. It's quite a nice house quite a big house too, live as a rich person, you know, NRI, rich NRI. And I was sending that tuition money to her to basically finance finance her lifestyle over there. She had some money from savings that she had transferred to India, but the rest, more and more, I was making up the difference. Finally, 2 years of doing that, I reached a point where I couldn't take it anymore. I was amassing debt. I was taking out loans that would be hard to pay off. I reached the point where I just couldn't take it anymore. I would be saddled with this debt. I was worried about my job prospects. And I was still repulsed by the thought of, you know, stealing from my dad, that I finally broke, and I sent an email to both of them. First to my dad confessing that I had done this, and then to my mother saying, you are getting out of my house and you are going to stay in India you're basically getting out of my house. You can stay in India, do whatever you want, but you're out, and I'm not going to give you any more money. Yeah.
So it had to be that bitter of an experience to get away from it.
It was very bitter.
And you talked about these low points where you even contemplated suicide. Because most Christians give you those kinds of scenarios. Their turning point to turn to God was they contemplated suicide, but then God magically appeared and he said, I'm with you and I'm going to save you. Even people like Ravi Zacharias himself has as part of his testimony, right? So a lot of, I mean, even there's this guy called, who's this person? Some Singh. Sadhu Sundar Singh, I think I read.
I've heard his story, yes.
Yes, and him, and also Bhakt Singh. All these people have the same template. They all tell you that they hated Jesus, but then they had a low time and they all wanted to commit suicide, and then Jesus appeared in the dream or something, and then that's when they gave up everything and now they're Christians. But from your story, it seems to be the opposite. You went to that low point to come out of Christianity, though, so that seems like a very unique thing. What do you think happened there?
I was at these low points before. I never felt any sort of comfort during my parents' tumultuous marriage, the divorce, and I never felt any comfort when my mother was threatening to kick me out. And I just never really felt any sort of comforting presence of God, Jesus, Holy Spirit, whatever. They're supposed to be 3 in 1. And I never really felt anything. And I certainly, and as the years went on, as my work in nursing continued, I saw no evidence of some benign presence in my work or in my life, to be honest.
So it is some kind of a disillusionment that at every point you picked up yourself with your own strength. There was really no divine intervention. No. And even when your mother could be kind, she turned away from you, like you mentioned that when you lost your job.
Yes.
And it's always like it's a punishment from God kind of thing. You're not faithful enough, or you're not godly. Yeah. And because I see that's very similar to what we've been through, like a failure in an examination. Even though my father would not provide the right kind of environment for us to study well and things like that, but the moment something happened, there's a setback, he would just say, no, because you rebelled against God, because you're not obeying God, because you didn't go to church on time. So that's why all of these punishments are happening. So probably the people who got converted to Christianity in these dramatic ways have not had the baggage of having to deal with Christian parents like we have done.
so.
Right.
Maybe so. That's why I think they're lying.
They lie, obviously, because they don't know that to get to that point, it is a Christian faith that pushed you to that point of contemplating suicide, because that was a tormentor. But for these people, I don't know whatever was their torment, but for those of us who walked away from this path, yes, because if I sit back and recollect all the difficult times in our lives, it was not because we couldn't get along as a family. It was not because we had any kind of misunderstandings among our siblings or anything. It was always because of Christianity.
Yes.
Any conflict in our family was not because they didn't mean well for each other. My parents, they're not people who bicker and fight. They're not that kind. They're very easygoing people. And even among my siblings today, I don't have that kind of a relationship with my brothers like I used to have. It was not because generally in the context of conflict, it comes because of properties or it comes because of other things. But today, the conflict in the family is simply because of Christianity, because of the Christian faith that dictates you that now that your sister is, or now that your daughter is not Christian anymore, you need to kind of prove a point that now you're standing on the side of God and not being wavered away into the ungodly path. And it's interesting that you actually talk about, even though it is not even the kind of mistakes that your mother was doing, making you steal from your father. These are, they don't have to do with Christian morality. It is the morality of the world that you don't lie. I mean, you don't lie on your tax returns. You don't lie on your financial transactions. It is a financial fraud that she's been doing, which is not even acceptable outside the Christian circles, right?
In no circle.
In no circle is acceptable. But then you vouch to be on the side of this great God while doing all these things. Like, how do you justify all of these things?
Right.
And the next thing that I wanted to ask you, Maya, is, of course, there is your relationship with you and your mother. So she was for the major part that representation of God or Christianity. But you also have your own, from your own interactions with Christian groups, Christian pastors, or whoever they are, you also happen to have a certain connection with the Christian world, isn't it?
Yeah.
So do you ever bring this up to them to find out, like, why is your mother behaving like this? Did you ever bring it up to any of them? And if you did they have any answer for it?
I don't think anyone in my church knew of these behaviors. And by the time we moved out of California to Colorado, she wasn't affiliated with any church. World's Last Chance is based in Australia. And there are people that follow them outside of Australia, but they're not with them. There's no groups that really, they all congregate online on their own for self-study, I suppose. But nobody in my church knew what she could be like. I wasn't allowed, I couldn't say anything to outsiders, even if they were other Seventh-day Adventists, because from a young age, I was told not to talk about our family business to outsiders or even to other family members. So, when I was in India, my parents' marriage was starting to disintegrate, and she was getting increasingly angry with both my brother and I, and she would beat us mercilessly, using anything she could, to wield as a stick. I told my nainama, and she told my tata, and they went to my dad, who was too busy going on business trips and making business deals to realize that his home was not, that his children were suffering. And he said, you really should divorce her for their sake. And get them out of this. But and my mother found out about it, and she found out that I had told my nainama, and it had gotten word, and then it had passed on to my tata, and she cracked down on me so severely that I never went against her until much later. This was when I was 8 or 9 years old, and I didn't do anything until I was 27 after that. So there was no way I could talk to anyone in the church, or even her own family members, like my Masi, my other aunts and uncles, her cousins, or to my cousins about anything that was going on.
So it's a very interesting thing, because that's exactly the kind of trauma I have been through, because my father maintains this larger than life image. He is the kindest man on earth, the most generous man you can think of. And he has helped a lot of people outside his home, his own siblings and their children. And he's known as a person who cannot he cannot be corrupt. He was a very upright government official. So there is this public persona about this man. Okay,
Right.
and obviously it is very hard for and of course there is a group of people that are very loyal to him within his own family and also in the church. Okay, so even though he was the reason of a lot of persecution that he brought into the family, it is almost like he acted like uh, he was the enemy at every point in every decision that we took. If you have to get a better house, and it was all for him. It was not even his will. He was trying to impose the will of the church, and the church used him to that. And anytime we resisted, he tried to create a narrative among his relatives and also among the church people that he is actually being tormented because of that, and he is the one who is suffering, and we are the ungodly people that are making this godly man cry. And even to this day he still maintains that kind of an image. And uh, it was very hard when I speak about these things. For a long time it was very hard because I myself was enamored with that image he had. Like if he walked into the village that he bought, like people would treat him like he was a god walking. And to talk about such a man, and to see the other side of that man, and even to publicly talk about it, it causes a lot of anguish to me as a daughter, and also to all the relatives, because they have seen a bits and part of it. But when I bring it together and say, if on that day he did not do this, this is what you expected that your uncle would do for you. But if he did not do it, it is not because he was directed by the church not to do it. And they saw glimpses of him here and there, but they were financially dependent on him. He helped them a lot. So it was very hard uh, for me to even talk about it. Even to when I talk about these things, I'm not talking about his personal thing, because that's really not, because he's personally a very nice man. But when I talk about it, they kind of attributed it like, oh, you're bringing shame to the family's name. You're putting our business out on the streets. And they kind of think that what I am doing now as part of exposing Christianity and the duplicity that happens in Christianity, the hypocrisy, the kind of breaking of a family that happens in Christianity, when I talk about that, suddenly now it is attached to their family prestige. It is suddenly now attached to the public image that they have. They have this very respectful image, and now today I'm trashing all of it, and I'm bringing them to the streets, and I'm dragging them to the streets, and everybody is talking about their business. But it is not that I want to talk about their personal issues, but it is the controlling factors that we want to discuss. We are discussing at that high level, using these people as examples, and what happened in our lives as examples. But conveniently, they want to make it appear as though like, oh, she's sitting and talking ill about her family, the parents that raised her, that kind of stuff. So when you, I mean, probably you never did that while you were still with her. Under her roof, or when she was with you. I mean, it is kind of funny to say that you were under her roof, because obviously you were the reason she had a roof on her head.
Right. Yes.
in some sense.
Yeah.
Did you ever sit one-on-one with her and talk to her about it?
No, I was not able to. After being cracked down upon when I was 8, I learned the lesson that I couldn't go against her in any way. So not even having this kind of talk. This is something I wish to have, I hope, before either of us leave this earth. But it wouldn't happen while we still had a relationship. I want to ask, is your father's family still Hindu, or are they also Christian?
They're Christian. He managed to come.
Oh,
he managed to convert most of them, yes.
Oh, okay, yeah.
No, see, because these are the conversations I could not have with my own father, because either he would get extremely angry and try to kind of show physical aggression if you try to reason with him, or kind of cross his path, or he would just quietly go and lock himself in the room. So he did either of those things. But he's somebody who doesn't sit face to face. I mean, he'll talk about everything under the earth, like politics and other people's lives, everything that is not that he's somebody you cannot have a conversation with. You can sit together with him and have conversations for hours about everything but his faith and the way he's unreasonable. And anytime you question it, he's just so angry with that, and he will create a scene. And I mean, there were times, like even few years ago, like just like I was like, my mother had a very serious knee surgery, and he was just trying to go away to the church, and I was trying to argue with him, because what happens is at the height of the argument, you lose your words, because
Right.
when
Yes.
you're angry, you tend to do that. And
Right.
and whenever you do that, as unfortunate as it is, my mother comes to the rescue, because now he's like, oh, how can you be disrespectful to your dad? Because those kinds of things. But he will always make sure that the attention is taken away from showing his pitfalls. And it is a very difficult thing, because not many people understand that it is very hard to have a heart-to-heart conversation with people who are taken over by Christianity. It is
Yes.
one of the hardest things. um, I mean, you're your daughter, and you've been living with them, you know them so well. Like, why can't you
Right.
talk it out? Why can't you reason it out? Why can't you square it out? No, it's not
You
possible,
can.
because it's a stone wall. And you, even if you try to do it, you're just hitting against the wall and hurting your own self. And I think a lot of viewers don't understand this. They think that any problem can be sorted out within the four walls of the family.
No.
It's a reasonable assumption in normal families, but not in families where Christianity has taken hold of.
No. Definitely not. No.
And I'm kind of, you kind of verify what my experience has been, because you talk about the same thing.
Yeah.
All right, let's go back to where you said she went to India, and even in India, to provide for her life, you had to give her the resources that you had.
Yeah.
And how did she take it when you said that, no, I don't want to do it anymore? Was she
Oh,
angry? Sad? Or
she didn't take it well, and she was threatening to come back, file a lawsuit against me. And she said, I will take over your house. Never mind. At the time I had bought a house, it was in my name. And she said, I will take over your house and you will be kicked out onto the streets. She saw it as her house because she had provided a little bit of money towards the down payment. And that was from a second mortgage she had taken out on the house she had bought in Colorado, which she sold shortly after I bought my house. But she saw it as it was her house because she provided some money towards the down payment. But she was threatening all sorts of things, like filing the lawsuit, suing me, and that I would be cursed forever, which I expected I would be cursed forever. And I mean, I heard it before. At that point, I was quite over it. However, I was fearful that, she would indeed follow through on her threat as soon as she returned to the US. And I had to hire a lawyer to help broker this settlement between us, where she would have her possessions in the house given to her to take back to India or to get rid of. And she would be provided one lump sum of money, and that was it. I didn't even have to do that. I wasn't obliged to do that, but I just did it for my own conscience, I think.
so she did come back to US and took all her belongings and went.
Yes.
That must have been a very hard thing, personally to you, because it's after all your mother, right?
Yeah.
So just seeing her just go through that, what helped you to get through all these things? What was that anchor? Because obviously these are not easy situations for anybody.
No, it isn't.
And to get over it and still keep yourself together. And obviously it is not Christianity that provided you the succor, right?
No.
It is not that, because obviously it is all discarded already. So what provided you the strength to handle this crisis?
At the time after I told my dad what I was doing, he didn't get angry, and he forgave me soon after, and he said he'd offer to help me through this. He provided a lot of strength. And also it was my own, I guess it was whatever inbound strength I had in me, realizing how I had been used and abused all this time. at at that time I decided, you know what, it's okay to not be a Christian anymore, and I officially renounced Christianity, and I started identifying as an ex-Christian. Started going to support websites to and read that my experiences are quite similar to others. But at the time I just decided I was going to be an atheist. The I My embrace of Sanatana Dharma came a little after the dust had settled from me severing ties with my mother.
So, what caused you to look to Sanatana Dharma? Obviously, you said you lived, you identified yourself an atheist for a little bit. So, from there to Sanatana Dharma, how did that happen?
You know, it took a long time to get there because I still had that association of idol worshiping being a sin or a bad thing, even after I cut ties with Christianity for good. It was a year afterwards that I was visiting my dad. He still lives in California. And I came across a book on Swami Vivekananda on his bookshelf. It was the biography by Romain Rolland. And I was just captured by this story of a young monk back in 1893 who set sail for America and was the first to actually bring the knowledge of Sanatana Dharma or Hinduism to the United States, which at the time was still a very strongly Christian country. Being part of another religion was out of the question at the time. And I was just impressed by that. From there, I actually joined a local, after I went back to, after I went back from visiting my dad in California, I joined a local group for the Vedanta Society. In India, they're known as the Ramakrishna Mission. And I started to learn more about Sri Ramakrishna's life. And my interest in Advaita Vedanta developed from there. I've since kind of distanced myself from the Ramakrishna Mission for other reasons, but it was my start.
So, in all of these things, right? One of the gripping things in Christianity are two forces in my mind, because obviously they talk about financial allurement and things like that. But for somebody who is financially independent and somebody who is not dependent on the church for any kind of resources,
Mm-hmm.
in my mind, I always thought two things keep people hooked on to Christianity. One is fear, the other one is guilt. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to see, how did you get away from these two things that are the forefront of Christian faith, where you're terrified about this God, and because in no culture you see that you need to fear and tremble before God. I have not seen that
Right.
in Sanatana Dharma, but in Christianity that is a very important thing as part of your faith, as part of your Christian path, right? And of
Right.
course, guilt is because even though you are saved and even though you were this, but you were unworthy of this grace.
Right.
God chose you even when you were not worthy. So how dare you even question this God? How dare you walk away from this God who gave you this salvation even when you did not deserve it?
Right.
Those kinds of
Yes.
stuff. So how did you get over these two big forces?
Yeah. The fear was the first to go, especially as I started working, and I felt I was doing a good deed on the Sabbath, taking care of patients. Why would I go to hell for that? And then over time, that just led to disillusionment about any sort of divine presence helping these poor, unfortunate people I had to take that I was taking care of as part of my job. And the guilt also went away because I had to work a lot of weekends and night shifts and made my peace with that as a nurse. And the guilt to officially break away from Christianity, I suppose I realized at some point that if this Christian God, who I refer to as Yahweh, and that's how he is referred to in the Bible, I just realized if this God is indeed real, is this a God I really wish to worship? He embodies the worst qualities one can imagine in a human, let alone a deity. They go on and on about Krishna having 16,000 gopis / wives and being naughty, stealing clothes, stealing butter. That's not the worst that pales in comparison to being a jealous God, ordering genocides of people, damning people who don't believe in him anymore to eternal torture, hellfire. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, because yeah, what you bring up makes me actually laugh, because the Christians think that they're going to shame Hindus by saying that Krishna had this 16,000 wives called Gopikas, or
Yeah, yeah.
whatever that is, right? And it's almost comical to me that they think that the human morality can be actually attributed to God also, and then the God has to be, our God is sinless, our God, and all of their sin has to do with uh, relationship with the women, and remember, this is a creator, so what
Right,
kind of relationship he chooses to have with God is totally at a different realm, but then they attribute it to a human relationship. uh,
right, yes.
and it's but then when it comes to their God, the God that they project has all the bad qualities of a human being: angry God, jealous God, hitting people, killing people, and but then somehow he happens to be a holy God, because of the one reason that somehow he did not marry, or he remained a bachelor, whatever that nonsense is.
Right,
So the unholiness about this God is only attributed to the sexual orientation of the God, but nothing else, right?
right.
So whenever they're talking about Hindu gods, they're saying their obsession is with sexual relationships of gods. I'm like, what the hell? What is going on in your head? Um,
Yeah,
eh, I mean, it's a very funny mindset that Christians have developed. Especially, no, I don't think these are the ones from the U.S., because they don't know any better. But this is what the Indian Christians have. They make series of videos about talking about gods, the Hindu gods and their immorality.
mm,
It's just comical to see that.
yeah, it is.
But then you bring out that even if Krishna had, say, 16,000 wives or whatever that is, it is not to harm anybody. Here is your God trying to kill people, bloodshed, killing children,
Right.
and asking people. This God did not have anything to do with women, but he ordered his people to take women as slaves,
Yes,
unmarried women to
yeah,
keep for yourself. So
right.
it's a different kind of perversion, that your God enjoys you have been seeing you have fun with all these women that you torture and brought as captive.
Mm,
Right?
right, yeah.
But it's a very interesting thing. But let's go back and say that, okay, so the guilt aspect of it, you got over it because of this rational thinking, right? Because you
Right,
said, let us look at the God, um, the, the the, you cannot touch this God. This is the untouchable God in that sense, right? But
right,
you kind of question the morality of the very God based on
right.
his acts of genocide, and now these Christians are saying the Jesus is not somebody like that. He was not violent. He was a loving God. So how do you reconcile that?
With, it was my understanding that Jesus, God, Yahweh, and the Holy Spirit are all one as part of the Trinity. So I looked at them as all the same entity. And my thinking about Jesus evolved from, okay, he was a preacher from that time. He said some nice sounding words, with the Sermon on the Mount. But over time and through my own study, I realized that Jesus may or may not have said all those words that are attributed to him in the Gospels. Um, there are a few books helped me to deconvert, one of which is Jesus Interrupted by Bart Ehrman. Have you heard of him?
No, I didn't. I need to get that. No, I
Yes.
heard of him, but not the book.
Yeah, I think you should read it. It's very eye-opening on the words attributed to the gospel that there may not have been attributed to the authors that are credited in the New Testament. It's quite eye-opening, to be honest. That helped me to deconvert. There's also debate on whether this Jesus existed as a historical figure. I happen to believe, yeah, he might have. There must have been a random Jewish preacher named Yeshua, but certainly not one person. He could have been a composite of many apocalyptic Jewish preachers at the time. So that's what I currently believe now. Jesus is more or less irrelevant to me. And even if Jesus was real and he said all those things that are attributed to him in the Gospels, some of it is not good. Like, for example, there's Matthew chapter 10 verses 34 to 36. Those are the verses where he said, do not suppose I have come to bring peace. I have not come to bring peace but a sword. For I've come to turn father against son against his father, daughter against mother-in-law, so on and so forth. And a man's own enemies will be in his own household, which, by the way, was in one of the emails that my mother sent to me during this time when I was severing ties with her. She sent a series of poorly written, typo-written emails full of all this madness. And one of those emails had those verses.
Yeah, because now we have become the representation of somebody who was turned against them. That's exactly what my father thinks. Like, he's like, okay, my enemies are his entire life. He created narrative that he wanted to follow God very sincerely, but his enemies were his own children and his own wife who are trying to move away from God.
Right.
And fortunately now my brothers and my mother kind of decided, so they kind of stayed with me in this journey till I publicly said I'm not a Christian anymore. But once I say I'm a Hindu, now somehow they all become one group and I've become the only one. But that's okay. It is the path you take. You pay the price for it.
Right.
And talking about there is this misconception, right? A lot of people, especially I married a Hindu and I had to get married in a registered marriage. It's not a traditional marriage that I had. Because one of the things I was sensitive at that time was I didn't want to have a Hindu marriage. And then probably I had this fear that if I take on a Hindu identity, that my parents might cut off, or I might not have anything to do. So I kind of stayed away from that Hindu identity. So one of the things that I'm
okay.
The connection is unstable. I'll cut it off if I need to. It said that the connection was unstable.
Okay.
So where was I? Okay. Yeah. So one of the things that people talk about is whenever they see it, they somehow think that running away from Christianity or giving up Christianity is because you're somehow not. You're looking for a freedom to be sinful, or you're incapable of living a holy life, and that is the reason you choose to walk away from Christianity. Especially after I made a lot of these videos public, that's mostly what they talk about. Yeah, Christianity is a narrow path, and because you are not able to stay holy, you chose to walk away from Christianity.
Or they'll say that you were never a Christian to begin with, and they'll cite, I forget, I'm trying to remember where exactly the verse is. They came from us, but they were not a part of us, so to speak.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about, in this context, I want to talk about what are the coping techniques that Christianity has taught to be a good human being. Really, the claim today is that Christianity makes you the best version of yourself. Okay, that is a claim. But from our experiences, we have seen our own parents not stick to that template. Okay?
No.
So, but that misconception is still there, that Christianity is a path that makes you a good human being and a model human being. So did the Bible itself provide a tool to live an upright life? What is given in, I'm not talking about the Old Testament, but the New Testament. What aspect of New Testament can I take up and say, this is my moral code and I want to live by this?
Although there were nice sounding words in the Sermon on the Mount, blessed are the poor, blessed are the meek, I really didn't derive any morality from it. If anything, I probably looked more towards the 10 Commandments to help, or so I thought at the time, but I realized that really, these are, I think, with indwelling morals that we all hold as human beings, with inborn empathy. Like if if you do unto others as you would done to you, you don't want harm to come to yourself, so you don't want to harm somebody else. Right.
You can see there is also another aspect of it, right? Because this reminds me of that Bible verse where Jesus tells them, if your eye offends you, pluck it out and throw it.
Right.
If your leg offends you, cut it off and throw it. So really, I mean, since you're exposed to Hinduism, I know the having control over your own indriyas, okay, that is the human struggle that we have, okay?
Right.
And the desire or the maya that you get, the mithya that you get stuck in, okay?
Yeah.
And there are many coping techniques. There are yoga, there is meditation, there are so many techniques that are not self injure inflicting in Hinduism that provide, okay?
Right.
In order for you to be a better version of yourself, in order to be a good human being, there are many techniques that nobody tells you to pluck your eye out.
No.
But Christianity's way is that Jesus himself said, if your eye offends you, pluck it out, so that you go to heaven with one eye, without blind in one eye, then be stuck in hell. So to me, this is not a moral code for me to organize my life, okay? And the idea of being a good human being is not about just being a good Christian. In the way I relate to the world around me, I have to be a good wife, I have to be a good mother, I have to be a good daughter, I have to be a good daughter, I have to be a good professional. There are many roles I play. Okay, there is not only one role. And what I have seen in Christian families happen is, in Christian, this fanatic Christians, is their identity as Christian has consumed other identities, where they don't care about what kind of a father am I, what kind of a mother am I, what kind of a daughter am I.
Right.
And they hurt people in any number of ways in all these roles. But then to keep that identity as being a Christian, I'm a good Christian. So in order to be a good Christian, I can play a villain role in all of these things, and then use that as I'm hurting my children, or I'm hurting my mother, or I'm hurting my daughter, but still I'm doing it to please my God.
Yeah, my mother is the same way. She's justified everything that she did. She's also estranged from her own family. You know, my nani, her mother, she was estranged from her for a long time, until towards the end of my nani's life, when my mom went back to go play savior. Never mind that my masi was taking care of my nani all that time. And she justified that. She totally justified, playing the part of a good Christian, but not treating others the way a decent human being would treat others. So she didn't really fulfill her duties as a mother, a wife, or a daughter, and certainly not to anybody else.
In conclusion, Maya, I wonder, people that get trapped into this Christianity are people that are conflict-ridden to begin with. And I don't think they've ever gotten themselves away from that conflict their entire life. They're still there. But then they have, and I mean, I can go as far as to say, I hate to say it because our own family members are in that boat, but some of them might have deep psychological problems that actually need a help of a psychiatrist in some sense, because of the problems that they have. And religion has stopped them from getting the help of a proper medical help for some of the problems that they have. And it exacerbated their behaviors, it worsened their behaviors, and that in return has inflicted wounds on the family members around them. And their extreme behaviors somehow were what you would clinically diagnose as eccentricities have been attributed as being extremely religious, extremely godly, extremely righteous. And in that, they now that they're protected by this layer of being looking righteous, this crude behavior or this violent behavior was all now being packaged as being a Christian.
Right.
And that didn't allow them to personally get help
No.
to become better people. Obviously, then your mother sitting alone by herself, do you think she's a happy woman? I don't think so. Like,
I don't
she
think
has
so
lost
either.
everything, the wife, the children, our own parents. Like, today, if something happens, there's nobody to run even to take care of her. Like,
No.
you isolated yourself from any sensible relationship that you had to prove a point to what?
Right. I don't get it either. I don't understand.
And all of these troubles that you are going through is for you to go to heaven, to live happily there, which you could not do while you were living on this earth. And what
Right.
makes you think that the God that didn't help you to live a happy life while you were on this earthly life is going to suddenly make your life better when you cross over?
Right.
And
Exactly.
these are some of the conversations that I mean, I wish there was a way of communicating these things with well-meaning Christians who can answer these questions. And in your journey, did you find anybody like this with whom you could communicate? Of course, forget your mother, but anybody else?
Not in my life that I could talk to face. I would, when I couldn't find answers in the Bible to some questions that I had about Christianity, why it is the way it is, I turned to these apologist podcasts, like, for example, you brought up Ravi Zacharias. I used to listen to him quite a lot because he brought in a so-called intellectual perspective of Christianity, which now I realize is complete bunk, nonsense. But other than that, I really didn't have anyone I could trust to answer my questions. Even my pastor, he wouldn't provide meaningful answers, and I could tell then, as a Christian still.
So even the people that are supposed to lead are also blind in some sense, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
kind of questions that we ask are not unusual questions. But those questions were never asked. And even if they were asked, they were snubbed.
Right.
So you kill your own reasoning, and then you use that process to tell people that I never questioned, so how can you question, kind of thing. As a pastor, I never got these doubts, but how, as a follower, you are getting these doubts.
Right. Yeah.
Those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So I think this summarizes a lot of things. We discussed a lot of stuff. And if there is one message that you want to give to that struggling Christian who's contemplating getting out of Christianity, but still is in this dilemma because of family relationships or being looked upon by the people inside the church as somebody who's now become evil and things like that, what would be your message to them?
First, I'd just like to say that, it's okay to have doubts. It's okay to ask questions. And I would suggest that you follow these doubts and questions through to the other side, and not to, if you find yourself reaching the inevitable conclusion, don't fight it. You'll end up more tormented than before. Just follow through with it. And realize that, yes, many people are going to look down on you and say that you're evil. Especially if you're in India, they'll really say that you're evil. And even if you don't embrace another religion, such as Hinduism, they'll still say that. Just even so, for your own conscience, I think this will be for the better. You might find yourself with more peace at the end to further explore the world around you. Take you on whatever path you might find yourself on.
Thank you so much, Maya. I thoroughly enjoyed talking to you.
Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And if you have to do more sessions on this, we would continue. But
okay.
Your personal journey session, I think we talked about a lot of things. We talked about our own internal conflict. We talked about the conflict that is around with the society. In fact, I want to do another session where I want to talk about this morality of Christianity being thrust upon on the larger society. What conflict does that bring? Not amongst just family members, but with people around us in a larger society. That's one thing that we want to talk about.
Okay.
But it's been a very pleasant interview for me, and I hope our interviews, our viewers are able to enjoy this. Thank
Yeah.
you so much. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you.